Thank you so much for joining the First and Long podcast. We're in the middle of breaking down the Big 12 and to talk some Iowa State Cyclone football. Mason, how are we looking with those Cyclones this year?
Yeah, so looking back at 2022, by any Cyclone fans' reasonable expectations, I think that they underperformed, right? They ended up 4-8. And when you look at Bill Connolly's um, SP Plus Power Index, he actually had them as a top 50 team, which would suggest, based on their schedule from last season, they probably should not have gone 4-8. So what actually had to happen for them to go 4-8 is a lot of close games. They actually 6 of those 8 losses were lost by just one possession. So you have to imagine that a more experienced group will be able to put a few more wins on the board. And in order to do that, they've also got to have better special teams play. The kicker, the poor guy, he was a true freshman, and he stepped in and just really did not perform well, and that's really a big reason why they had so many of those one possession games. I'm told that, or the word is, I guess the buzz is that they have another kicker. He's going to come in and challenge Jace, but Jace, it's still his position to lose. I think that this is a guy who was an athlete coming out of high school, 4-sport athlete, and he should be able to kind of get back on his feet a little bit. Hopefully, the offseason's done him some well. Maybe he's matured a little bit, and hopefully these kicker jitters get out of there for the Cyclones.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it seems like Matt Campbell has been there a while, and they must really love that guy, and he must really love Iowa State because, man, I can remember where this guy was one of the most sought after coaches, and every time there was an opening, somebody was trying to get him. So, as far as the additions that he's brought in to help this team this year, um, through the transfer portal and through recruiting, uh, what kind of changes can we expect to see with this team this year?
Well, let's start with the bad, right? They lost 4 players to the NFL. Okay, that's pretty significant.
That's a lot
You
for
know,
Iowa State, it seems.
that's a lot from a 4-8 season. That just goes to show you that they were better than 4-8. I think on paper, from a power index standpoint, they were just better than that. So, but they lose X-Man, they lose their wide receiver Xavier Hutchinson, they lose safety Anthony Johnson, defensive end Will McDonald IV, and defensive end MJ Anderson, all to the NFL. They also lost 11 to the transfer portal. So you may see that and you say, "Oh my gosh, 15 players gone. Wow, that they're going to be worse. That they might go 4-8 again." Well, actually, if you really study the attrition, okay, those 4 players were going to go regardless, right? There's nothing you can do with good talent. They're going to go to the NFL. There's not much you can do with that other than try to replace them. The 11 that were lost to the transfer portal were all players who saw relatively meaningless snaps. These were players who had 2 tackles last season and 5 tackles last season and a couple of catches. So not a significant loss, in my opinion, for what you could be losing as Iowa State after going 4-8. Not a whole lot of loss, but and more importantly, this is certainly not what they saw between 2021 and 2022, where they lost Brock Purdy and Brees Hall. That was a huge loss. I think that this is manageable. I mean, 4 players to the NFL that certainly made an impact. It's going to be tough, but outside of that, like I said, just not a whole lot of production being lost. Now, as far as who they're bringing in, they did only pick up 4 players in the transfer portal, 3 of which plan to start. So they couldn't have felt too bad about these, all these players leaving. Um, they may have gotten rid of some that they didn't actually like. You never know, behind closed doors what exactly goes on, and they've got to feel pretty confident in what they have, or else I would imagine that Iowa State would have been able to make a little bit more of a splash. But one note is that I think you should look to see transfer Jaden Higgins make a splash at receiver, as he kind of replaces um, X Man as the X Man.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And as far as before we get off the offensive topic, do we expect a quarterback battle, or is this Decker's job?
It's certainly Decker's job. They really have a pretty deep quarterback room by Iowa State standards. They have four guys who could play. I think for Iowa
I saw they
State,
have six
that's
total on scholarship. That's unbelievable.
right, right, and four of them are legitimately pushing for playing time. Matt Campbell, I think if Deckers is not performing well, if he's still passing, I think last year his passing percentage was under 60%. If he's performing like that, I, I think that Matt Campbell is going to be forced to pull the trigger and go somewhere. If one of those guys are stepping up, he may not have an option, but it seems like based on the buzz around spring training, some of these guys are stepping up and making some plays. But make no mistake, it's Decker's job to lose. And behind him, they do have one of the quarterbacks that's pushing for playing time is a very talented true freshman, a top 100 overall player, JJ Cole. And I don't expect him to get any playing time, at least not until maybe the end of the season, where Matt Campbell says, "Okay, let's transition away from Deckers and look into next season where JJ Cole could take a big step." The offense just has to be much better this year. They were worse than 100th in the country in SP plus, which really just kept a really good defense on the field and it gassed them out. So you know you've got to play complementary football, and Matt Campbell knows this. He's not out there just trying to put on, a defensive juggernaut. But that's kind of what he had last season. We mentioned, you know, they had uh, NFL talent, three players that had NFL talent on their roster on the defensive side alone last season. So that had a lot to do with it. But the defense ended up ranked sixth in the nation for 2022 in SP plus, and like I said, you've got to play complementary football. So I don't expect a whole lot of drop off in the defense. It's going to be hard to replace those three players that went to the NFL, but I still think that Matt Campbell is going to be able to put on the field a top 10 or 15, a top 10 or 15 ranked defense. The big question on defense is going to be, can you replace those two pass rushers?
Absolutely, absolutely. You're talking me into Iowa State here, so let's see if you can keep it going and get my money out of my pocket at the betters window. They're over and under 5.5. What are you thinking, and what are you feeling on the schedule? You've done the deep dive. You tell me.
Gosh, another, Vegas has kind of stumped me again. I feel like they're doing this entire offseason. My numbers are lining up right with Vegas's. So I also have this at 5.5. Um, I've got guaranteed wins at Northern Iowa and at Ohio week 3. In week 2, they have Iowa at home. Um, week 4 is Oklahoma State at home. Week 5, Oklahoma on the road. Week 6, TCU at home. Week 7 at Cincinnati. Week bye week is week 8. Week 9 is at Baylor. 10 Kansas. 11 at BYU. 12 Texas. And week 13 at Kansas State. This is a very difficult schedule.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why this number is so low. I told you kind of all the good with Iowa State and the bad, really. But I do feel like this is a pretty good team. This is going to be perhaps another top 50, maybe even better in the power rankings. But when you really break this schedule down, this is going to be a huge challenge for the Cyclones and for Matt Campbell. You'd like to see them take a step forward. But I think 5.5 wins is going to be really hard to get over. It's not impossible. They've got push games with Iowa coming to them, Oklahoma State coming to them, TCU, who's not going to be what they were last season, coming to them, Kansas coming to them. I'm a little bit higher on the Jayhawks, if I'm honest, but that game could go either way in week 10. You never know what teams are playing for at that point. So a lot of home games that are, that they're on the fence about. Four of them that they could come away with. I do see them winning two of those, so I would put them at 4 wins, and they got to come up with another 2 wins after that. It's going to be a real challenge. Like I said, 5.5 is a stiff number. But this is a veteran group of guys. So of the 22 projected starters per on three, only two of them have less than 2 years of experience. At worst, I do think that this team is going to win 4 games, though I don't really see that happening. Um, I'm going to actually go with the over. I think that they end up 6-6 and go bowling, and there is somewhat of an achievable ceiling at 9-3. I think realistically, somewhere between 5 to 7 wins is what you can expect. I'm going to land right in between that and say they end up 6-6 for the 2023 season.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on the over, but I think I'm going to one up you. I think I'm feeling 7-5 for this team this year,
Okay.
and I'm going to tell you why. Uh, you know, just looking at the schedule, I know that week two, uh, it's kind of weird to have a rivalry game in week two, but they get Iowa at home, and that is a big deal in that rivalry game. That is a very, very big deal. And with everything that you've told me, we already knew this was a good defense. Uh, it sounds to me, it seems like Iowa State is cyclical. It seems like it takes 2 or 3 years for them to gear up and get a really good team, and
Well,
then
they are a cyclone overall, so cyclical is kind of what they are by nature.
absolutely, 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 cyclical is their mascot. But no, I think that the Iowa game is a winnable game. That's going to be a more than likely a rock fight that second week of the season. If they can win that game right there, I can almost guarantee 7 wins with this schedule.
Hmm.
Maybe even 8. So you've got at Ohio, Oklahoma State. We just don't really know with Oklahoma State. They could wreck some seasons, or they could get wrecked themselves. I'm really not sure. At Oklahoma, I don't think it matters where you play Oklahoma. You're losing that game. Um, that some of these other ones are toss ups: TCU, Cincy, Baylor, Kansas, BYU. We're going to have to see how these teams perform in the first 5 weeks of the year before we're going to know. Um, but that Week 12 Texas game, man, I tell you what, I've just got a funny feeling about that.
Interesting.
Texas is going to be, if I'm not mistaken, and you people tell me if I'm wrong in the comment section, please. But I believe Texas goes to Iowa State and then to Texas Tech to end the year. Or they may have Texas Tech at home, but I'm pretty sure they end the year at Texas Tech. That's You know what? This is a perfect setup for Iowa State to just reach up and grab somebody like that, especially if Texas is undefeated going into that game and going to Iowa State. I just with that defense, you never know. You just never know. That's what a good defense can do for your team. It can keep you in games sometimes that you don't have business being in, and if you can get Texas in a rock fight, who knows? Who knows what can happen? So I like a 7-5 and at least 6 to go bowling for the Fighting Matt Campbells. I feel good about what the Cyclones are doing this year, and I'm thinking that this might be one of those cyclical years for them.
Yeah, and you mentioned Texas in Week 12. At that point, you could see Iowa State if things aren't going well. If they've only had only gotten 5 wins at that point, I don't think that by Matt Campbell's own standard that would be a successful season. But Texas and Iowa State, that Iowa State's going to show up for Texas regardless of where they're at in the season, right? And you mentioned having a great defense. They'll show up for a Texas. They will always show up for a Texas. So that's an interesting point. And I think that that's an interesting game. But like you said, the one that I'm circling is week 2 against Iowa at home for Iowa State. Um, this is going to be, if you look at both teams, I feel like this game is going to define their season, right? And so early in week 2, but I mean, if Iowa State's able to get over that and they start the season 3-0, and then you got week 4, you got Oklahoma State coming in with all that momentum, you might be looking at a 4-0 start before you go on the road at Oklahoma, and you dust yourself off, and then you bring TCU at home. So I think that this is a pretty favorable schedule from the sense of who they've got away and who they've got home and the timing of it all. And when you look at the momentum of the schedule, it could play in their favor. Got to win week 2, though, I think, for in order for all those dominoes to fall, like I just mentioned.